With us now, Ben Twomey, who's Chief Executive of Generation Rent. Ben, I know you got a chance to see that film, Carly's story there. You hear many stories like that.
Absolutely, far too many, I'm afraid, and it's just going up. There's so many people being evicted every single day, often through no fault of their own whatsoever, and there's just not the space for councils to find for them to move into a home immediately. So we really need the government to be taking action on this. We've had promises from the last government for the last 5 years to take action on this, but we still find people like Carly, one in a million people in the last 5 years who are facing one of these evictions.
So the language you're hearing at the moment from the new government, the government has committed to abolishing no-fault evictions. What do you take that to mean? What do you know about what will happen?
Well, we're daring to hope that they'll do that as soon as possible. They actually committed to do it immediately, and that hasn't happened yet, so they really need to move along with this. When that does happen, they'll end what's called Section 21. It's a no-fault eviction, which means that you don't have to provide a reason as a landlord to kick someone out. That creates all sorts of instability, and it includes when people make complaints that they can actually be kicked out just for making a complaint about the conditions in their home. So we're hoping that they'll get rid of those, and when they introduce new types of eviction grounds, so where there is a reason, such as selling the home, there needs to be better protections for renters. So at the moment, there's just 2 months' notice when you're kicked out of home. We can see in Carly's case and others how little time that is and how that's driving up the record numbers of children living in temporary accommodation. And so we need to see that notice period extended so that people have time to make the savings and find a new home.
And in Scotland, you can't do a no-fault eviction. You've got notice to leave, but even then, that's minimum 28 days if they've been in the property for less than 6 months, or they've breached a rental agreement. And that's the key, breach rental agreement. It can be anything they choose, really, can't it?
It can be, yeah, and there's still that no-fault eviction option in Scotland because it's not the fault of the tenant if the landlord wants to sell or wants to move a family member in. We think that 28 days is way too short. That's in the first 6 months of a tenancy in Scotland. The housing bill in Scotland is just going through Parliament as well, so I won't limit this to Westminster. In Scotland, they've got to extend those notice periods too because people are suffering and they've got a homelessness crisis of their own. They even declared a housing emergency very recently.
Well, this is the issue. Houses aren't just going to pop up, are they? I mean, we have a housing shortage. So even if no-fault evictions don't happen, are abolished, there are still valid reasons to kick people out, and and landlords, if they want to, will find these ways. What's going to happen if the housing stock is just simply isn't there?
Well, it's going to be an ongoing problem. We've been in a housing crisis for a long time. The last time we reached the target that the Labour government set of 300,000 homes being built in a year was 1977. So they really need to speed up this process. They're doing certain things on planning to do that, and we need homes available at an affordable rent where people live. But the problem right now, because that takes time, as you say, the problem right now is that eviction protections are so weak and rents are so high that you see the enormous amount of suffering in our country. And those two things can still be addressed through other measures.
Ben, you'll be aware that when we talk about these issues, and this is what you do, and we talk about it here, you will often get landlords saying renters need landlords. They need someone to rent off. And if the result of the change in legislation means more landlords say, do you know what, I don't want in on this anymore, I don't feel protected, I'm too at risk. So they put the places up for sale, which they're allowed to do. That is not a good result, isn't it? Because you do need rented accommodation. Is there a risk that in clamping down on the way that renters are treated, there could be just less rental accommodation available?
Short term, there's a risk because at the moment, if you were to sell your home as a landlord and kick the tenant out, you'd be out within 2 months. The clock starts ticking. Many people find themselves homeless. We need to change that to give more protections. We'd welcome the landlord lobby supporting us to give more protections around eviction there.
On both sides, do you mean? Because landlords maybe will look at, what you're suggesting and say, we too need protection against whatever. They would, in order to stay in the marketplace, yeah, they might say they too need protections within the law.
So let me give the example of moving from 2 months to 4 months' notice. What that means for a landlord is that they can't re-access their property for another 2 months. They may be able to have to delay their sale, for example, of the property. What that means for the individual, as we just heard in Carly's case, is potential homelessness, being driven into poverty, huge costs of a move. They're not equivalent. Renters need that bit of extra time, a bit of extra space to have in order to avoid the worst possible outcomes. Landlords I think, can bear that cost because of the enormous amount of money we're paying in rents already. If landlords do choose to leave the market anyway, we don't need more landlords, we need more homes. We want to access home ownership. Landlords often don't build, they're actually just buying, maybe skipping the queue in front of first-time buyers who can't afford it because we're paying so much on rent. So we need to find a way to build more homes, social homes, let people access home ownership. We don't need more landlords.
And just as last thought, I'm guessing from your first answer, you're not entirely convinced that this government is fully signed up to this. Are you worried they may pause and delay and waste time, as has happened before?
I'm afraid the 12 million renters in England are once bitten, twice shy on this one. If I had £1 for every time the last government promised to end Section 21, I'd probably find it a lot easier to pay my rent at the moment. So we're really hoping that they're going to do something. It was in the King's speech, which means that the government's committed to do something in the first year, hopefully, of Parliament. But again, we just need to see that action as quickly as possible so that every day we're not seeing more and more cases like Carly's.